Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to a brand new episode of For the Love of Humankind. This is a continuation episode of episode 7, where we talked a lot about capitalism. And now, Robbie, Frank, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how the two-party system has failed us and how we can move away from that two-party system. So, I hope you enjoy. I think that's a good point because we had this conversation on New Year's Eve, right? Of the three of us are extremely different than we were 8 years ago when we met. I mean, you two met 9 years ago, right? And so we are not the people we were then at all, right? And it's crazy to think of the things that we are doing now, and to think of the things that we wanted to do back then, right? And comparing it to now, and I think that that's a completely different conversation for a different time. But yeah, I think that if you start looking at the trajectory that individual growth takes place, I don't see why that can't also lend to growth of a system or growth of whatever the hell is happening most of the time, right? And so, a lot of our conversation has come back to how we're in our two-party system, right? And historically, that's where we've been. We've gone through what we're in, like technically the fifth or sixth party system in history, based on just like development of the Democratic and Republican Party. So do you two see a way that we move towards a multi-party system, or we're just not picking two front runners from a Democratic or Republican Party, right? Because you look at, we have people from other parties that show up on ballots. Do we entertain those individuals when it comes to debates? Never. And I don't know that in history, I mean, probably in history, there has been debates or conversation that have involved multiple parties, but at the end of the day, it's always come back to Republican and Democrat.
You're asking if we see a future beyond
Yeah.
Democrat and Republican?
And do you think, like, what do you think needs to happen for that to be realistic?
Well, it's funny because when Hillary was first running against Trump, and she was up against Bernie Sanders, and he was doing really, really well, right? Even as a Democratic socialist, he was polling pretty popularly. He was convinced to step out of the race because Democrats thought that he was going to take votes away from Hillary. So he did. He left the race, right? And what ended up happening? Trump still won.
Yeah.
Right. So what we have is this two-party doom loop, and that's a term coined by, I think his name is Lee Drutman. Where basically, I think you said historically we've had these two parties. So you only have these two choices, and the guy even said, Lee Drutman, he basically predicted in 2019. He predicted, if Trump loses, like there's going to be violence. And what did we see in January?
Mm-hmm.
We saw a domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol. So like clearly, this isn't working. And I don't understand why people keep just shrug things off like that when you can see something isn't working. They say like if it's not broke, don't fix it. This is broken. Like everything about this country is broken. It's like, why aren't we fixing it, right? So how do we move past two parties? It's a great question. I would say by first and foremost, supporting the Democratic Socialists who are in the Democratic Party. But again, that's just like a temporary reform. I know we talked about that before, the difference between reform and abolishing or dismantling. But but they have the tools in place to win elections. So that's a start. But ultimately, we have to start working towards multiple parties. I think there's a state on the East Coast that does ranked choice voting, which is different than a ballot. So basically, like you can say, there's multiple people on the ballot. You say, this is my first choice, this is my second choice, this is my third choice. Someone else says, this is my first choice, second choice, third choice. So instead of picking one or two people, you rank who you would like. And so you take like, this person has the most first choices, this person has the most second choices. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's another option. Whether or not the politicians currently would support that, who knows? So again, you basically have to start building a separate party. And I would say that would have to be a working class party. You start with labor unions, right? And then move up from there. I had another point that I was going to say. Oh, yeah, I say this all the time, or at least twice before. And, I'll say it again. I'll say it the third time. The people, non-wealthy people, working class people like us, we're not outnumbered, we're out-organized.
Yeah.
So the only way that things are going to change is if we rally together and organize either one new party, multiple parties, something other than the two-party system we have right now. So we just need to get organized.
I agree with that. And I would abolish the Electoral College.
Yeah.
I would literally, that is a system, is a good example of a system that does not serve us the way that it was originally intended for. And I think if you do that, if you eliminate it, or at least dismantle it as much as possible, you open up the potential for a populist movement. A movement that, like Frank is saying, like if we organize, because that's true, we are just out organized. If we were to organize over the course of time, what I believe we would see is, you see a faction of people here, a group of people there, whatever, and it's not just, then it becomes not just Democrat and Republican, it's those two probably still, although I would love to see a world in America where there's no Republican Party, but it's a different story. A Democratic Party, a Republican Party, a Libertarian Party, Independent, Democratic Socialist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, but before you know it, we have 6 or 7 primary candidates that are running and essentially trying to get the most votes. I'm not saying that's a perfect system.
Right.
But the Electoral College is not serving us. It is not serving us. There's no reason why Donald Trump should have won his first election losing by millions of votes.
Yeah.
There's just no reason. And I think there was some sort of data that, like, and I'm going to get this wrong, and I hate myself for it a little bit, but there's some sort of data that in the last 30 or maybe 40 years, a Republican candidate has won the populist, or the popular vote, once for president.
Yep.
Once. That every other Republican that has won has been because of the Electoral College, not because they've gotten the most votes. So, yeah, a grandiose idea, but I agree with everything that Frank said, except the addition that I would have is that has to be looked at ASAP. Like, we need to be reforming that. I guess I'll add a second part. Every bit of legislation that is now coming up that is trying to restrict voters needs to be done away with. Like, I get more and more furious every time I read it. I just sent you all something today about something getting passed in Texas. We saw the thing happen in Georgia where it's now illegal to pass out food and water to people in line, like, for no other reason except to restrict people, make it harder for them to vote. Like, what on earth? What on earth? And it's because the Republican Party lost.
Yeah.
That is the reason. So.
Well, there's that, and like I said before, the people in power aren't just going to let us take the power away from them, right? They have tools at their disposal to make sure they stay in power, and that's a prime example of them using that power to stay in power.
Yep.
And it's crazy to think about, because the country harps itself on allowing or people fulfilling their civic duty. And the civic duty is to vote. And you're not allowing people to vote, so you're taking away their civic duty, civic rights, all of that, right? And it's a walking contradiction, or I guess a floating contradiction, however you want to, put it out there. But no, I absolutely agree. And that's what I was going to say too, Robbie, is that I think for us to get to that point, we need to get rid of the electoral college, because at this point we define states by red or blue. What happens if a Libertarian Party wins? We actually don't have a color for that, so we're just not going to color it.
Green.
So like
That makes sense.
and it's crazy that we've moved into this automatic, like, I don't even know the word that I want to use, but assumption that a state is going to be red or blue because of the electoral college, right? And what would happen, say California, right, went Democratic Socialist? Is it still going to be constituted as Democratic and still going to be blue, and electoral college is going to be split or sent to the Democrats, or is it going to be sent to the Democratic Socialists, right? So like, I think that, like you said, Robbie, the electoral college system is not doing what it needs to do. And I think that's a start. And when we get to a point where that doesn't exist, we start to see, like you both said, these factions, these parties that are going to pop up or start existing, where you're going to see people running in these different parties and how they identify. But I also think we're in a system too, and Frank, I'm going to use you here as an example, but when elections took place, right, if you live in a red state and you are, blue, you already know that you're going to be outvoted. So why even vote? Right? And I think we're also in a society where people fear voting for an independent, libertarian, green party because they know that their party doesn't stand a chance. And I think we see that, and we saw that in this last election, right? There are people that voted Democrat who definitely are not Democrat because they didn't want a Republican to be, specifically Trump, in the White House anymore. And so I think there's a huge factor with that, deterring people from wanting to vote for the party and for the things that they actually stand for and support. And I think that's another issue that we see too. And so I think, getting rid of the electoral college would completely change that mindset of people and actually give them the willingness to like support who they feel is the best person to quote unquote be in power. But I also think that having one person in charge of an entire country is also kind of fucked up. Obviously, you have your checks and balances, but at the end of the day, one person, I hate it. Whole different tangent, but yeah, that's kind of where my thought process is with that whole two-party system.
Jeff, I love it when you talk, because every time you say so many things, and I'm like, man, I want to respond to that and that and that. And then by the end of it, it's a completely different tangent, and I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, you said a lot of points, but the moral of the story is that it's a trap.
Yeah.
It's a trap right now, and with the two-party system, I should say, the trap, and people don't feel hopeful and they don't feel motivated. I would say, by and large, there are people that are motivated, but the common attitude I hear or see is people feeling defeated. They're like, well, there's just no way we're gonna get out of this.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, yeah, no change happens with one person ever. There's not that I can tell. There's no movement. There's no revolution that has happened with just one person doing the revolution. It has to be collective. It has to be.
Yeah, and I think too, like, a lot of this conversation between the three of us started last March, right? It started with the death of George Floyd. And obviously, like, we've talked about things, you know, throughout the time that we've known each other, but I think it's gotten to the most serious points of conversation when that took place, right? And throughout the last year, year and a half, we have seen so many deaths by police, and we've talked about abolishing police, and we've talked about the need to survive, and how the system doesn't set people up for success to be able to survive, right? And then we see the cases that have taken place, right? You know, we saw the Chauvin trial, right? We got some sort of, I'm not going to say justice because we didn't get justice because George Floyd should still be here, but there was a small sliver of hope that we're going in the right direction. I think with that accountability piece. But then we see the trial with Ahmaud, right? And no murder charges. That we see hate crime, and I forget what the other one is.
Attempt at kidnapping.
Yeah, and so there's no consistency with that accountability, right? And you know, with that being said, do you two believe, you know, we've moved from capitalism to two-party system? Do you think that these two pieces play a role into the decision of these cases? Does that make sense? Do you think there's factors at play with that lend to why we aren't holding specifically police officers accountable for taking the lives of other individuals?
Yes, because it's profitable. And that's just a blanket answer. I hate to pivot what you just asked.
No, that's fine.
But I'm going to say something that I think could be controversial that I'm still working through.
Go for it.
I can't believe in abolition of prisons and believe Derek Chauvin should go to prison.
Absolutely. I was going to bring that up.
It is a very difficult thing, like dichotomy for me to work through, because he needs accountability and he needs, in my opinion, some sort of reform. But I can't identify myself as somebody who believes in abolition while also upholding that exact system. I think there has to be some level of accountability and some level of deep reform within him. I just don't know what that system looks like yet. So that's something I've been wrestling with. To answer your question, and I was thinking about that as you were talking. To answer your question, yeah, I think it's connected because it's profitable. It's all profitable. From all the way from people donating money to free Derek Chauvin or free these people that are being held before their trial, to lawyer costs, to judge costs, to how much that's going to essentially cost taxpayers living in those communities, and everything in between. I mean, it's all such a deeply woven web inside of capitalism. And so, to answer your question, yeah, I think it has to be connected in some level. In terms of the two-party system, I think it's connected because we choose our judges and our elected officials through that system, and those elected officials may or may not make money based off of those systems. So I think of something we haven't talked about, like big oil or even guns, right? It's profitable to keep these systems in place because it means people will continue to frack and continue to buy guns.
Yeah.
So I guess in my brain, I'm having a hard time understanding whether or not it's not connected, because in my head it is.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's going to sound like a conspiracy theory. But, you know, Republicans love conspiracy theories, so this is great. When I say the ruling class, I'm talking about not just wealthy corporations, but also the government, because they protect the wealth for the wealthy corporations. And the police force in particular has always been a tool to protect the ruling class's interests. The police were founded originally to chase down runaway slaves.
Yeah.
That's how the police in America were founded. And they've evolved since then, obviously. But now the police are used as a tool to drive a wedge in between the ruling class, right? To ensure the racial inequality, right? You got mass incarceration,
Yep.
which is where the prisons profit, like Robbie was saying. So, yeah, that's how it's all connected. The police protect the ruling class's interests, the ruling class being wealthy corporations and the government.
Yeah.
Again, sounds like a conspiracy theory, but
I don't think it does.
No,
I think it sounds simple.
And I guess looking back at my question, I laugh in my head because to be honest, I don't think politics exist. Politics is capitalism. Like, you can't have politics without capitalism, and you can't have capitalism without politics.
Well, nothing's certain, so.
So, does that make sense? Because, if you think about it, the amount of the amount of money that politicians spend just on their marketing campaigns, on average, right? And the amount of donations people get that fund into these campaigns, which then get funded back to being able to do their marketing campaign, right? It's a cycle. And so I don't think politics exists without capitalism, and I don't think capitalism exists without politics in our current system. Which I think, again, comes back to the point of policing, our court system, all of that is a part of politics and therefore a part of capitalism, which we've talked about. And I don't know why it took me this long to put those pieces together, but it reminds me, I'm using this image in my head of one of those finger traps that you one of your fingers is capitalism and the other finger is politics, and you can't pull them apart. You just can't pull them apart. And I think if we're to do anything in this system, again, you take away capitalism, I think the rest of the system comes down with it.
Sure, yeah, it all goes back to capitalism. But again, I know I sound like a broken record. People in power are not going to let that happen, right?
Right.
So, what do you do about that? You try to get the reforms, the small victories, while ultimately trying to organize a completely different party that's actually democratic and voted in by the people in an actual majority. That's why you abolish the electoral college. So it's a daunting task. I'll admit it, and again, it's not going to happen overnight. But that's not a reason to do nothing.
I love that, man, so much. I'll save it for not in this
Save it for part two.
Save it for part two. I think so. To respond to what Frank said in agreeing with him, you have to organize.
Yeah.
That has to be a part. I am all about it. You two will vouch for me in this. I'm all about reading. I'm all about gaining knowledge and going to school and being challenged. But at some point you got to put that to work. And that saying, knowledge is power. I don't necessarily agree. I think it is a part of it is.
Yeah.
But it's what you do with the knowledge. How are you putting it? How are you not only using it to better yourself, but better the people that are in your circle, and then bettering the communities you're in. So, for example, I'll put myself in that. If I'm reading and that's all I'm doing, then I'm going to bed and I'm sleeping 8 hours, and I'm not, really wrestling with it and reflecting with it and self-correcting and working through it. Like if that's all I'm doing, then I am not doing enough.
Yeah.
I have to be doing that. Plus I have to do that with you all and my other friends. I think a red flag for me right now in this chapter of my life is any person that considers or that I consider to be a friend, if they're not willing to have a conversation that's going to challenge them, then I don't want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
You both know this. I just don't want to spend time with them. I want to be challenged, and I want people to be challenged by me. But then it's your community. So are you doing it in your job? Are you doing it at your church if you go to church? Are you doing it with the organizations that you want to be a part of outside of work and church? Or, are you doing that? And if you're not, then I wouldn't be able to confidently say that I'm doing enough. Enough is a subjective word, but that I'm doing what needs to be done. And then it comes back to I have to do it with other people. Like I have to. It has to be collective. Yeah, I think that's to me where that's sort of the formula that I'm using right now. Is it starts with me. It extends to my circle, and my circle, or the people in my circle, extend back to me. And then it's in the communities that I consider myself to be a part of.
Yeah.
I think that's how we start taking steps.
Yeah, and I mean, I would absolutely agree. And that actually kind of lends to the next question that I have, is, looking at everything that's taking place in society. And we've been talking about it through the entirety of this podcast and the entirety of the last hour or so. What steps can we start taking now, right? We are 3 white men sitting here in a Discord call on a podcast that'll be posted to YouTube, right? Like, what steps can we take, right? And for those that are listening, like, what steps can other people take? Because at the end of the day, the 3 of us, the other 2 people that watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, like the 5 of us, like, what are we gonna do, right? Like, we talk about organizing, but what are 5 people gonna do? What can we do?
I think there are a bevy of first steps you can take. I think the first thing is you have to do some form of reading. Like you have to, and it has to be from a diverse, I would say a diverse, I guess, bank of sources, not just one source.
Yeah.
So not just Fox News, okay, Jeff? You
I
gotta
don't
stop watching it first.
No, you're right. Sorry.
Remember when I was talking about dumb fuckers before?
Sorry, I'm just so right wing.
You can't just get it from one source.
I can't help it.
So, you don't really want to take the advice that you're asking. So I think that's the first thing. I think attending discussions and workshops and putting yourself in positions to be in proximity with other people that have different experiences. I think it comes back to the language that you're using. Is it inclusive language? Are you cognizant of it? It's doing things like reviewing where people, like the money that you're spending to companies, what do they stand for? Right? If it's a big corporation that is again, like Chick-fil-A is a good example. If you love those waffle fries, that's great.
It's that sauce.
They're great. They're phenomenal.
It's that
the
sauce.
Is great too. They also actively don't want there to be gay people in the world. And definitely not trans or non-binary people. So, like, am I willing to spend my money there? I have to make a conscious choice, right? It's also, I think, holding yourself accountable and correcting yourself and being open to people correcting you. I mean, these are like the first steps that I think people take. And then reflection, I think, has to be a constant part of it.
Yeah.
Baby steps, but those are the first ones.
I mean, this could carry on into part 2 if you'd like, because now you said we've been going for like an hour now. So, but also, if there's only 5 of us trying to make a difference, then we are absolutely outnumbered.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. But there's definitely more than 5. I think, I don't know if you can call it a positive byproduct of the pandemic, but what the pandemic did do was highlight a lot of inequalities. So I feel like a lot of people, myself included, were feeling very frustrated about seeing these inequalities and not knowing what to do about it, right?
Yeah.
Like Robbie said, like I don't read as much as Robbie, but I do read some things, and so like I guess you could say I have this knowledge, but I didn't know where to put this energy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a problem a lot of people have. So what kind of what Robbie was saying was like reaching out to people who are involved, reaching out to a political organization. Like I recently got involved with the Socialist Alternative. And they're definitely putting their words into action, and that's where it matters. That's how we get organized, is putting our words into action. And it might be small victories here and there, but ultimately, the people have power, and we can hit the corporations where it hurts. They count on us for our labor. They count on us for us spending our money on them. They're completely dependent on us, so we can make all the difference.
No, like I absolutely would echo what both of you have said, and I think that the three of us have talked about this, right? The three of us attended, and I can't wait to say this and hear people's thoughts, but the three of us attended, right, a socialist meeting, right?
Socialist meeting.
Right, last week, 2 weeks ago, and there were a lot of valuable things, right? And I think, and I'd love to have this conversation because I think that so many people are uneducated that they, one, don't know the difference between socialism and communism, but they also think socialism is going to end the world.
Mm-hmm.
So can you two enlighten those individuals about the difference between the two, but also why socialism is a great potential next step for where we could be headed?
Well, with socialism, I can't speak too much on communism, but from my understanding, socialism kind of falls under communism, which I know a lot of people are going to lose their minds about that because we've been told our whole lives that communism and socialism is bad, right? But again, that's just a justification that capitalists use to stay in power. They want you to think that way, right? But communism, from my understanding, is just means like a classless society, so like everyone's equal. So socialism falls under that, where the means of production, the drive for that is just equal access to everyone. Whereas capitalism, the drive is profits. The drive in socialism is society, right? The benefit of society. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, I can't add too much more. I know less about communism than socialism. The way that I've heard communism described to me is, in very simple terms, is everybody shares the wealth, no matter who earns it. So, for example, you will often see at some places, some establishments where there are waitresses or waiters, that there's a tip jar, or there's a jar where people can put money in, right? At the end of the day, no matter how much money is in there, everybody is supposed to get the same amount, regardless of who worked the hardest, regardless of effort, etc. That's my understanding. It's a very simple way of thinking about it. It's my understanding of the way that a communist society would work. So there wouldn't be corporations that are owned by one or two or a board of people. It'd be owned by the people that live in that community, and decisions would be made by the people that are in that community. But anyways, I can't add anything else that other than what Frank said, because I think he's probably more well versed on it than I am. The one thing I will say for those people that are listening is, you're not ready to hear what we have to say. So the first thing I need you to do is to stop fearing it. Socialism is not a bad word. Neither is communism. It's not going to end the world if you just open your mind and listen to what people have to say. You might have some big feelings about it, but you need to work through that. And if you want me to help you, just let me know. Way to help you work through your feelings. I just like that's what it comes back to. That's why people, in my opinion, don't open their minds to things. They fear what it could potentially do, and they're like, nope, can't do that. We need to stay with what we have. I know that it hurts you, but it's not hurting me. And I fear what it would do if we changed, because I wouldn't have any money anymore. You all would have the same amount of money as me. So I think it comes back to that fear. Like you gotta stop. Like work through your fears. Okay, it's gonna be okay.
Don't be such a fucking pussy. Am I allowed to say that?
I might bleep it out. We'll see.
Okay.
But I bring that up, right? Because one, the three of us have all been called communists on social media by a variety of different people. And I think of it because I think in general, people like to compare communism. One, I think to Hitler. Like people are like, oh, Hitler, communist, like you're going to turn into Nazis, right? And that's not the case, right? I think there has been such, especially for those that are part of the older generation and in the instruction, people that were alive, World War II, you know, whatever, that there was almost like fear-mongering around that word and around the idea of communism. So that still exists, right? And it doesn't help that this is a whole nother topic for a different day, but it doesn't help that our government, more specifically the Department of Education, controls the knowledge and the information that is shared, especially within public schools, right? And again, whitewashing history through that. And so it becomes this, again, back to Franklin, what you said, those in power utilizing this fear-mongering technique to keep people in check. It's almost like, what is it, 1984? That's the title of the book, right? Like Big Brother, like it's never left. And I think that's where it gets such a bad rep because of that. Like I shared a TikTok. This is a completely different tangent, but it's related. But I shared the TikTok with you about MLK, right? And how we only see black and white photos of MLK and Rosa Parks, when color photography existed when the civil rights movement was going on, because they want people to think that it happened longer ago than what it was. Right. And I think the same thing goes with this ideal of socialism, communism, anything that's not Democratic and Republican.
Yeah, I mean, what made Hitler not a communist was that he was actually a dictator. Like the stuff wasn't owned by his people.
Right.
He was actually fighting against a communist, though, in Joseph Stalin. Conversation for another day. I think that, yeah, I think that again, you said a lot of things, and I'm like, shoot, where should I start?
I like to ramble.
But I think you bring up some good points. There's some things. We have a historian in the room that could tell you all about that. But there's some things throughout history that, in fact, most of history, at least in America, has been put into nice little bite-sized pieces of information that is nice to hear. We abolished slavery.
We were friends with the Native Americans, and we broke bread with them.
We had a
turkey.
Nice dinner. There was no killing, raping, and pillaging. So don't ever believe that when people tell you that.
We put stuffing in our turkey and had candlelight dinners.
There's just a lot. There's a lot, and our general public is not necessarily taught how to discern between sources. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't taught how to do that. I had to learn how to do that. luckily I had some phenomenal professors that helped, and some phenomenal people in my life that helped. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot that could be said. We don't have a lot of time, but I appreciate that we were able to have this conversation, and I hope that the people that are watching that called us communists really take a look and really decide whether or not capitalism is actually helping them too. Because my guess is they don't make a lot of money. So really, capitalism is probably hurting them. And I'll just leave it at that and not point any fingers. Okay, Frank's dad?
Oh.
You blocked me on Facebook, so I want you to hear me talk directly to you. Also, I'm not brainwashing your son.
The college professors did it already.
Sat him in front of a TV, strapped him to a chair.
Yeah, Clockwork Orange.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have enough time for a whole history lesson, so save that for another time. But that's interesting that you say the little bite-sized pieces of information, because for the 5 people watching, in your free time, if you want to look at these little instances throughout history since the inception of capitalism, there's always been resistance to the capitalism. You see that in certain revolutions, like the Russian Revolution in 1917. Look into that if you want. So where there's power, there's always going to be resistance, and I would say, and you say, well, yeah, there's been resistance, but capitalism has never really been dismantled since its inception. I would say the time is right for that because the conditions are perfect for the people to organize. You have these things where communication is instant, so we can organize ourselves much easier now than in 1917, even though they were technically pretty successful in Russia in 1917. I know that the FBI probably tuned in at that point, like, wait, this guy's idolizing Russia in 1917? Like, what's going on here? But yeah, I would say the time is definitely right for us to organize. So that's my little nugget of hope, which is rare for me to say, but
Wow.
there we go.
Hey, we got this. We got this. It's permanent. So I do have one last question to kind of wrap us up here, and I know that y'all are like, get me the fuck out of here.
Places to be, man.
Robbie's got breakfast to make, or pass out. I don't really know. But now that we're in, now that we're in a position where, you know, people now have 5G injected into their bodies, and but we're in this position, right, where things are hopefully beginning to change, right? But there are obviously still people, right, that are gonna sit down, listen, maybe not even listen to this, but we'll post something on Facebook or something along the line, and we're gonna get people commenting back, saying, "Oh, but Robbie, Frank, and Jeff, whatever would we do if we didn't have a police system? How would I ensure that everything that I do is safe? Like, who would I call if I'm in danger, or if somebody tries to attack me? Like, what if, you know, the Democrats just ruin everything that we do? Like, whatever shall we do if none of that exists?"
I just want to make it known that Democrats aren't even great either.
Right.
So, like, I'm talking about Republicans being terrible, and they are, but Democrats aren't that much better.
The better of two options.
Yeah, it's literally a lesser of two evils in most cases. But my response to you is you don't going to be, you don't actually care about the answer you're asking me rhetorically. You don't care about what the possibilities are. You're just asking me to try and get a response that is actually rhetorical. You're not going to listen to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to spend my time trying to convince you. When you're actually ready to open up your brain and your heart, then I'll start talking to you. Because there are so many resources. There are so many. Just like Frank said, we have phones, we have tiny computers literally in our pockets everywhere we go that we can use. We just have to know what to look for. And I got some good Google keyword searches for you, and you can see for yourself. That's my response.
Yeah, but I get all my news on Facebook, so.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. Truly, you're not being given the opportunity, clearly, by yourself to actually learn. It doesn't seem like you actually want to learn it. You just want to keep getting your same news, and that must suck, really, being vacant, uninteresting. That's what I would say.
Talking to me?
Oh, no.
Are we talking about the police again?
Talk about
what would you do? How do you respond?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you already called out my dad, so I guess I'll keep talking about him. Because it's a prime example. He's constantly sending me videos of crimes that have happened, and like, this is why we need police. And then, like Robbie said, like, the police are reactionary for the most part. Like, if you're in danger of, like, from an intruder or whatever, and you have to call the police, chances are by the time they get there, like, the crime has already been committed, right? So what's the point? Why are we paying these people? And he said, well, if we abolish the police, then, gangs are going to run wild. And my response to that is, well, the police is a gang.
Yeah.
At this point.
And they are running wild.
Yeah, they are running wild. Killing people all willy-nilly. So, like I said before, it's broken. It's not working right now, so we have to change it. What's it going to look like after? I don't know. But again, I know right now it's not working. So that's my response to that.
Yeah, I think you two nailed it. I think of the comments and the amount of comments that we've had and the conversations that we have held with other people, and the amount of my family that probably hates Robbie, and likewise hate the three of us, especially when we're together, because I think that the three of us are a force to be reckoned with. And I think at the end of the day, we are part of what is going to move this society forward. And I'm confident in saying that. A lot of the people that are making these decisions, a lot of the people that are making these comments, they're on their way out. They're on their way out of this life. And we still got, hopefully, plenty of time to live, right? So why is it the people that have less time to spend making the decisions that are impacting the people that have more time to spend? It never made sense to me. Like, what? That's why I think there needs to be a cap on how old the president can be. But again, whole different conversation. But I do want to thank both of you for spending this time talking about this, because this is a very critical conversation that I think needs to be had, and I think that there are people that are going to watch this and it's going to fall on deaf ears. We already know, but I'm hoping that for those that understand what is taking place and that are hoping that there will be changes, they know that they have the three of us that are there to support and there to have that fight with them. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to make the difference. Not just the three of us, but we are part of what's going to make the difference in moving this society forward at the end of the day. And so, again, I thank both of you for being a part of this. And I want to give each of you, a moment or two to kind of share anything that you're working on, promote anything that you've got going on, or any final thoughts.
I'm not doing shit, man. You mentioned the Irish Exit Everything podcast. Not a lot going on there. I have less than 5 listeners, to be honest.
You shut your mouth.
What I'm doing in my personal life, I try to be active in food activism, which you guys know, which can be supporting sustainable agriculture, but also ultimately food activism is making sure everyone has equal access to
Mm.
healthy food. So to do that, ultimately, again, it comes back to capitalism, because industrial agriculture has a surplus of not sustainable food that only goes to certain groups of people, which typically means, the Black community suffers from food insecurity a lot. Um, so that's kind of what food activism is all about, and that's what I try to. That's one of the battles that I've chosen. Right, I mentioned the struggle is
Yeah.
multifaceted. That's one of the things I focus on is food activism. But other than that, yeah, not a lot going on in my life.
How do I follow that? Yeah, Frank mentioned choosing battles. I've got a number of things that I'm involved in, and I think if you ask me in another 6 months, I'll be involved in some other things too. Just depends on how life works out. But I think the things that I want to share right now, the things that I'm most, what I care most about, or that are most central in my life, are working with a group of educators. Jeff mentioned at the very beginning, but I am a part of a 3-person education group called the Fire This Time. And basically we are focused on helping to educate and create pathways for people in a variety of, I would say, fields. So higher education, nonprofit, private sector, etc., helping them to become educated and learn how to create actual sustainable change in their communities. And so we do anything from workshops to presentations to seminars and so on. That's what I probably spend the most of my free time doing and working on. I also, I would say, care deeply about educating other white people on their whiteness. And I am of the belief that white people have to be a part of the solution. Like all of the labor can't be on people that are already oppressed. And so particularly with white men, I think that's sort of my niche in terms of education, is working with people to help them understand themselves better and help them unlearn some of the habits and attitudes that they have. That's where most of my time goes.
You two are doing great work. Again, appreciate you two spending this time on the podcast. We'll definitely have some more conversations in the future. And so, if you watch this podcast and you hate the things that we talk about, go ahead and like the video anyway, subscribe, comment down below. If you love what we're talking about and want to get in touch with any one of us, feel free to shoot me a message, and we can work through contact details with that. But stay tuned for the next episode. And then if you made it this far through the video, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and have a great day.